Okay, so yesterday we were learning about whether or not you could do Kiddushin with Bnei Echad. The Gemara had a discussion about it, and then the Gemara started getting into other features of the Eid Echad. So we discussed splitting up a Yerusha, a chalois of Mammon. Does it need Eidus for it to be Chal, or is it just for the proof of the matter? And if you don't feel like you need proof, you don't need to have Eidim. And in fact, Rav Ashi told the two brothers, Mar Zutra and Rav Adis Saba, that they don't need to have Eidim to split up the Yerusha. The purpose of Eidim is Elul Shakri, to make sure that people stay honest. So we were almost at the bottom of Samach Hayamud base. So we'll go back to where we were, about 8 lines from the bottom. Amar Abaye, Amar Loi Eid Echad. An Eid Echad comes up to somebody. So Reuben goes over to Shimon and tells him, Achal Tochedach. Baloi Shoisik. Shimon is quiet. He's silent. Like a shtika kaida. Now, when it comes to a chiyuv chatos, the Torah says, Oy hoida I love chatos. If you did an avera and you didn't know about it, and then it became known to you, Oy hoida I love, it became known to you, and we learn from there, Veloi sheyoidi uhu acher. If you don't find out about the avera by yourself, you're only aware of it because someone told you about it, you would not bring a chatos. Yet Abaye says here, if Amar lo Eid Echad achal techela v'lo shoisik nemon, and you do bring a carbon chatos, and the Gemara brings a raya, they bring a carbon chatos, because the Gemara says the Tana Tuna, we have a Tana that says Amar lo Eid Echad achal techela. If an Eid told you, Reuben told Shimon, you ate chelav. That piece of meat you ate last week, it was chelav. And Shimon says lo yachalti. That's not true. It was Shimon, so it's potter. So if Shimon unequivocally denies and says, I did not eat chelav, then an Eid Echad could not be mechayivim with chelav. Taimod Amar Loi. You see from the Bryce, it's only because Shimon denied it. Ha'ishtik had Shimon not denied it, mehemon, he would be believed. And Rashi says, because the miyut of Hoydei Lov Chatosa, V'loi Shoyodi U Acherim, is being memayit if someone denies it. But if someone accepts it, then it would be mechuyev. Now, the problem is, Lamaisa, I still don't have my own independent knowledge of it. So Tosfos, and there's a long Tosfos here, Tosfos is masbir that it's working with shtika kaidah. Tosfos says, and I think that's how Rashi learned as well, here's the shtika kaidah. When I am quiet, when someone tells me it's chelav, it means, yes, I know that must have been chelav. That's called that he became aware of it on his own. What if what if he said, you're telling me it's chelav, but I don't know. I don't have any independent knowledge. Then because it would be a chasarid in the love. So I'm not 100% sure if Rashi argues on this. Tosfos says beferish. If you say Eini Yodea, if you're shtika kaidah, which means, yeah, you know something, I think you're right. I think I did eat chelav. Then I'll be mechuyev in a carbon based on another aid, bringing that to my attention. But if I says, I'll tell you the truth, I don't know. If you tell me, okay, but I have no knowledge of it on my own, that would not be mechayiv from a carbon, because that would not qualify as oy hoida elov chatosoy v'loy sheyedu acher. If you look at Rashi Kubi says the same thing. I'm not sure. Nemona aid the kosher carbon. The ein kan mishum oy hoida elov chatosoy v'loy sheyedu acher. V'hachi darshinu la b'shmat shekamai shadish rabba v'loy sheyedu acher v'hu makrit. So it sounds like from Rashi, only if I am makrish, meaning I say it's not true. If I said Eini Yodea, it's not clear to me what Rashi means. I didn't look at the Achronim, but Rashi says that being makrish, which means you're contradicting the aid, and you're saying, no, I know it was Shuman, that's when you don't pick a carbon. Tosfos says, even if you say Eini Yodea, the aid is not believed. The aid will not be mechayiv you a carbon. But Tosfos says you should just know v'dafka echod avol shnayim nemonim umevi carbon. If two Eidim come along and say, you ate chelav, even if you don't know about it, you would bring a carbon, and that's because of a different limud that we have from the psukim, and that is in the hevi'u shnayim l'dei misa chamura. If two Eidim could bring someone to death, lo yevi'u l'dei carbon akal, In other words, are we worried that he's bringing chulun lazara? If we're not worried about killing an innocent soul when two Eidim come and say Eidos, we surely aren't going to be concerned that he's bringing chulun lazara. When it says in our Mishnah that, or in our Gemara, when Abaye said, when the Eid says Chal Techelev and V'haloi Shoisek and Shimon is quiet, it means the Amar Loi Ha'ed, not only a Chal Techelev, but V'hoyelach Leda, you must have known about it. V'hu Shoisek. So then he's also admitting with his Shtikah Chaydah that he was aware of it. You know, it's like sometimes in court when you sue somebody, you knew or ought to have known. So you must have known about it. And by him being shoisik, he's being minded that, oh yeah, you take out my memory, now take that it probably was chaylev. And only then will it trigger a chiyuv chatas, according to Tosfos. And then once again, when we brought a raya from the Brisa, if the person says lo yachalti, if he denies it, he doesn't bring a carbon, and from there the Gemara was like, if he was shoisik, he would bring a carbon. Tosfos speaks out. You don't have to contradict the Eid Echad and say, I did not eat chaylev. You could even say, I have no idea. If you tell me, maybe it's true, I can't contradict you, but I definitely don't have any independent knowledge of that. He would also be potter, because as Tosfos said earlier, it would not meet the threshold of Yehoida Ilav Chatos. Gewaltig. Now we're going to look at the next case of Eid Echad, and Tosfos lays down the law of how Eid Echad works. It's fascinating. So far what we've learned is if someone is shoisik, then the Eid Echad is nema. What if the person contradicts the Eid? Surely the Eid Echad would not be nema. But Tosfos opens our eyes to cases where even if you contradict the Eid, sometimes you might be mechuyev anyway. So let's see the Gemara weiter. You had Paris that were tahar, and they became tamei, which means now you cannot eat them when you're tahar. You can only eat them when you're tamei. And the owner of the Paris is quiet. Neman, he is believed. The Eid Echad is believed, and we treat these Paris as if they're tamei. And the proof is v'tanatuna. Eid Echad omer nitmu, v'alomer lo nitmu potter. Only if he says it's not nitmu, it's potter. Now, what does tum and ta'ir have to do with potter? That's why if you look at the Dalid, the Tziyonim once again come to our rescue and say Tahar. So and the owner said they did. I disagree with you. They did not become Tamei. Then we say the pairs are Tahar. That's because he denied it. He contradicted the Eid. If he had a shtika kaidah, meheman, he would be believed. There's two other cases that we discussed the namonus of an Eid Echad. V'yamar Abaye, amalo Eid Echad. If an Eid Echad told you sharchar nirba, your shar was nirba, and therefore, what impact does that have? If there were two Eidim, the shar would be killed, but they were not two Eidim. There's only one Eid. Since there's only one Eid, we say it's also to bring this for our carbon. So if you weren't trying to bring it for our carbon, there's not going to be an impact. You can continue to use this ox to plow your field. So Valash Shoshik Neman, he's Neman, and therefore this animal will now be prohibited to be brought as a carbon. Or if it killed somebody, that's also a reason why it would be usher to be brought as a carbon. Or if the bailam admitted, Neman. What exactly is the al pe'erech? If the bailam are in agreement that this is what occurred, isn't that the case of al pe'ah bailam in the Brisa? What about the other cases in the Brisa? It must be the other cases in the Brisa where the bailam doesn't agree. It must be that even if I didn't contradict the aid, but I didn't agree to the aid would still be neman, and the animal would be usher to be brought as a carbon. Utricha, Abai told us three cases in where we trust the Eid Echad. The first case was a chal techela to bring a carbon. The second case was nitmu tayroisecha, and the third case was about an animal that was nirva. Why did Abai have to repeat the same halacha three times? That in the case of shtika kahida, the aid is believed. Utricha, the ashminin hachamais. If we only had the case of someone who was told that he ate chela and he was shoisik that he had to bring a carbon, that's because we know he must have his own knowledge. Back at the back of his mind, he must have his own knowledge that he did eat chaylev. Because he loved the kimle ben afshei, the avad. If he didn't really know that he did the avera, where the Aleph changed it to Achal, if he didn't really deep down know that he probably ate Chaylev, Chulun Bazar Lev Amaisi. He would never allow himself to bring Chulun Lazar. It's a scary thing who wants to be over the Aver of bringing Chulun Lazar. So he probably does remember more. So there, yeah, we'll trust Eirechad because clearly the person himself has an independent memory. There was a Hoydei Lev Chatos. But if the aide is just saying that my parents became Tameh, why would I even give him the respect to respond? Meimer Amrinon, hi the Shasuk, you know why he didn't respond? Because why should I respond? The Savar Chazile, he made them outside. So big deal. So I won't eat these payers when I'm tar. I'll eat them when I'm Tameh. So I'm not going to bother fighting with him. But it's not like there's an independent verification from within the Balabais himself. So therefore, Abai wanted to speak out that even there in Eirechad would be Nema. And if you only know these two, there's still a some loss. Nearby. If I had no intention of giving my shores a carbon, I use it to plow with. So why would I care? So it was nearby, big deal. Doesn't make any difference to me. It's completely irrelevant. Meimar Omar, Shvarim, Lav Lagavim is back timing. It's not like all oxen are going to be brought as carbon. This is a working ox. So therefore, I have no reason to contradict him. But Lav Davka, it's true. Shricha, but in all these three cases, his shtika does, in fact, mean that he agreed. So I don't want to take so much time because we don't have a lot of time. But Tosfos brings down. See here, Abaye said all his halachas uncontested. So Tosfos tells us that there's three cases of Eirechad. Our case is a case where the Eirechad says something and you were choice. What would happen if you contradicted the Eid? So Tosfos brings a case where someone tells his friend, I am currently working, they were working together in the Tahiris. I was helping you process your pears, I was sorting your pears, whatever it is. And while I'm sorting your pears, I see that it became Tameh. And I tell you, your pears became Tameh. They're your Neman, even if you contradict. Why am I Neman, even though someone contradicts me? That's because I could be Matama them right now if I want. I'm still working with those pears. So therefore, everybody agrees, even Abaye, anyone who argues, Abaye holds even here, but everybody agrees there, even when there's a contradiction, he's Neman. So that's rule number one. Then there's another rule. What if I was working with pears and now we're 2 weeks later and I go over to him and I say, you know what? Back then, when I worked with you on the pears, they became Tameh. It's not Biyadi anymore because I'm not working with the pears. I can't be Matama them anymore. So there, Tosfos brings a Gemara that says that he's not believed, although Tosfos brings a dissenting opinion over there where it would be believed. So it says, "V'hasam ka'amar Rava." I'm actually like 4 lines up into skinny lines of Tosfos. I'm just going to pick and choose different lines in Tosfos. V'hasam ka'amar Rava ashkechei v'loy amar lei v'hadar ashkechei v'amar lei. Rava quotes a following halach. I meet you, and I had worked with you in your pairs a couple of weeks ago. I meet you, and I didn't mention anything about them becoming tummy. Then a week later, I meet you again, and I say, oh, by the way, they were tummy. Zog Rava there, I'm not believed. Because if it was true, why didn't you bring it up to me the first time you met me? Elamai, it wasn't true. Now, for some reason, you want to bother me or something. Vice to chois, normally I would be believed, even though you're contradicting me. So that is the shita of Rava. Rava argues on Abaye. So because of that, Tosfos says, "V'nirad halacha k'Rava." We do paskin like Rava l'gabe Abaye that in such a case where it was once biyada, since it was once biyada, that gives me an emunus. So there's 3 levels. There's a level where it's biyada, where I'm neman even if you contradict me. There's a neman where it was once biyada, now it's no longer biyada. There Abaye holds I'm not believed. Rava says I am believed even if you contradict me. And then there's the Yosy, like our case, where everybody agrees it is believed. And now Tosfos runs through a whole bunch of halachas of when an Eirechad is believed. So I'm now 6 lines down in the wide lines. Towards the end of the line, Tosfos tells us, he gives us a quick Hitcher Shulchan Aruch of all of these halachas. I'm sorry, it's the second wide line. The second wide line in Tosfos towards the end of the line, Tosfos gives us a Shulchan Aruch. If it was something that was once in his hands, if I'm actively involved in your tahiris right now, and I tell you they became tamei, I'm believed even if you contradict me, because I could make a tamei right now if I wanted to. Something that you would never be able to have any shaykhs, like make me eat chaylev, like our Gemara, or v'sharcha nirba. All the cases in our Gemara are all cases where the aid could not possibly have impacted this on his own now or ever. There ishasik me'emen v'lo ishasik loy me'emen. That is our halacha in our Gemara, which everybody agrees to. Where there's a dispute is bedavar she'ein biyadei ata. Right now, as I'm saying testimony, I could not have made anything change. But once upon a time, I was working with you in your tahiris, and at that time I could have been metama them. This is where there's a machlokes Abai and Rava. Abai says, I'm not believed, it's not believed. Rava says that it is believed. The shoisik, the Omar b'shmaitzin, the Nemon, and even in our case, where if you don't contradict the Eid Echad, when he tells you ate chaylev, there's conditions to that. Yes, he's believed. Yes, you bring a carbon. Yes, the animal cannot be brought as a carbon. Yes, you're tahirish hatame, but that's only near l'ri. Daini b'davar sheyesh loy leida to go in she'amar loy nisnasech yenech b'fanecha. This only works if it's something where I ought to have known. So I ought to have known if I ate chaylev. If you're telling me that I ate chaylev and I ought to have known and I agree to it, only then am I mechuyev a carbon, because you still need the in order to be able to bring a carbon. But if the aid says your thing became osir, but there's no way you could have ever possibly known because this happened when you were not aware of it, that's not a shtika kaida. That's the shtika of eini yedea. As Tosha says, the shtika of eini yedea means nothing at all. You know why there's no response? Because he has no idea. That's not there. There's no nemanis. The nemanis of shaisik is if we could say shtika kaida, but you could only say shtika kaida if there's an argument that the shaisik could have known about it. If the shaisik clearly couldn't have known about it, how could you interpret it shtika kaida? And that we said that if the aid could not have impacted this, if he's not, if the person contradicts the aid's not believed. This is a very important halacha that's going to be negei l'maisa. Hainu gavra mehemen kibei trade. That's if it's just a regular person. But if it's a person who you trust, like two aidim, if it's a person that you would lend him $100,000 because he asked you to, then you would actually have to accept his edus, even if you have no idea. Like we're going to soon see gabe sami, and that is legabe, someone telling you that your wife was a zayna. If you trust this guy blindly, then you would actually be also to your wife, or your wife would be also to you. And I'm going to tell you a chilling story about that later on.
Literally.
I'm sorry?
I thought it was more. It's like literally blinded.
Yeah, the Amar Rava, the Nema, the case there was, I trusted somebody like two Adam, and normally you need two Adam, us or a woman, but if you trust this person like two Adam, in fact, surely the aid would be Neman to tell you something else. And I got to give you another piece of information. This is a shmaka, finally a kula. This that we have the rule means you can trust a mashgiach that it's done properly. This bosser has its gittin taken out, has its dam taken out, or its chaylev taken out. This chaticha is shomen and it's not chaylev. And Eirechot is never nemon to ask for something on you unless you have the shtika kahidah. Another caveat. If an Eidach told you something and there's no way you can ever prove him right or wrong, there you don't have to trust. But if the Eidach is testimony on something that we know will be clarified at the end, the Goyin, there's a share with you right now in your payers. There's a guy right now. You can come, come, I'll show you. There you at least have to check. As we're going to see later on in the Gemara by a Balmum who denies he's a Balmum, the Kohen say, yeah, take off your clothing. I'll prove to you have them. So these are the rules. Eidach Adam B'Shurin is lahater, not to answer. And Eidach that you believe Kavei is Legabi you, it's like Beitrei. The third halacha is if it's Yochalis Bar, the Eidach is Nema. Then we have the three categories. If it's Biyadai now, he's believed in if you contradict him. If you're Shoisik and the Shtiga can be interpreted as a Haidah, as a verification that it's true, the Eidach is Neman. And if you're contradicting me in something that I once was able to do, it was once Biyadai, but no longer Biyadai, there it's a Machlokes Abai and Rava, and Toshim can be passed like Rava. So those are the rules of Eidach. Zok the Heilige Gemara weiter. Zok the Heilige Gemara weiter. We're going to get some tragic Gemaras. Iboyelahu. Ishtoi Zinsa. Here's where it gets tragic. Ishtoi Zinsa be'Eidach. And the Eidach comes along and says, your wife was Mazana, meaning now she's a Soita, she's usher to you. The Shoisik, the husband, is silent. Ma, what's Allah? Amr Abaye Neman. Abaye says that the Eid is Neman, and now she's usher to you. Rav Amr Ein Neman. Rav says she's not believed. You know why? The Eid is not believed. It takes two Eidim to be able to answer a woman. How do I know this halacha that an Eidachud would be Neman to answer a woman to her husband? Now, who's Sami? There was this blind man. He came to take a course by Shmuel, and he was learning Mishnayos by Mar Shmuel. So he was in a course that had a daily class. One day, this blind man didn't show up to class. So Shmuel sent a shliach to find out where is this student. The shliach took one path to this blind man's house. The blind man came using a different path. Also, he came in a different path. So they didn't cross paths. Meaning the shliach ended up at the blind man's house when the blind man wasn't there. He also shliach, when the shliach came back, Omar, he said, Ishtoi Zinsa. I got to his house, the blind man wasn't there, but John was there, and they were in bed together. So this is a huge problem. Also, the Kamei de Mashmul, they asked Mashmul, what should we do? Omar Lay, he told the blind man, if this shliach is believed to you, if you trust if you, Mr. Blind, trust this shliach, zilafka, you have to be megarish your wife. The Eloi, and if you don't believe him, loisof. So what was Shmuel paskening for this blind man? My love, if you consider him a kosher erecha, you don't know him, you don't have a specifically close relationship with him, but he's a decent guy, he's a good yeshiva guy, I know from around, he's okay, then you have to trust him. So you have a raya. I don't know. I hear, but I'll call upon him. If he's not a low, if you don't look at him as a low,
Yeah,
I hear.
1,000% trust him. He's saying that,
So that's exactly why Abai held it was a riot that a regular aid could be believed. But Rav Amar, what are you talking about? That's not what Shmuel meant. What he meant is Hemloch Kavei Trey. Would you lend him $100,000 right now? Then you have to salaf. If he's just a regular guy, then loizafka, he doesn't have a demonis, which really Rav is taking Dovi's opinion. This is a place which becomes so negei al halacha rachamanu litzlan. The Shulchan Aruch discusses this very case where an Eidechet came along and tells somebody that his wife was Mazana. What do you do? If there's an Amonis Kavei Trey, that's why Reb Moshe would try to convince him, you trust that guy? What are you trusting the guy for? But if you really trust the guy, and it's not shot since you don't like your wife, and you want to believe the story so that you trust him, you can't say, I believe in Kavei Trey. There's going to be a litmus test. How close are you with him? Would you lend him $100,000? Write him out a check right now for it. Would you do it? No. Then he doesn't have a Kavei Trey. So it has to be a real Nemonis Kavei Trey. Only then could an Eid Echad answer. And this is where there's shalos in the Shulchan Aruch. What if it's neman kavei? What if you saw it yourself? So the halach is it's also to live with this woman. There's a big machlokes if they will force him to divorce his wife. Maybe we just paskin that she's usher and we tell him he's not allowed to live with her, but do we force him to divorce? That's also one of the discussions. But there's a chilling story that happened with Rab Shach, and that is if a woman comes along and says, "I was mezana," she admits it to her husband, "I was mezana, I slept around on you." What is the halacha? Is she believed or she's not believed? So the Mishnah Rishona in the early days of the Tanoim, if a woman said that, she would be believed. She would be usher to her husband who would have to divorce her. But the Mishnah Acharona said things are different nowadays. We're choshed that this woman doesn't like her marriage. She wants to marry somebody else, so she wants out. So this is an easy way out. So therefore, the Mishnah this is not 2023. This is back in the times of the Mishnayos. The Tanoim already said a woman is not believed. And here there's so many shilos that you see in the Shulchan Aruch about it. A woman didn't get along with her husband, and because of that, she said she was mazana, and he divorced her, and she married somebody else. And now she has harata, and she wants to come back. The question is, once she's nemon, is she allowed to take her back? Is it a question of an erva? Because since there's different levels. What if he believed he's going to give her a get, but he didn't give her a get yet, and then she changed her mind? That's one child. What if he already acted on it and gave her a get already, and then she changed her mind, and she said it's only because we were in a fight that day? So there's a lot of raid in the early Achronim how to deal with these cases, and vice versa. There was a fair amount of cases like this, enough that the Achronim are writing about them. So there was a very scary story where a woman of Balas Tshuva came to Rab Shach. Daniel Finkel told me the story. I'm saying shir for him for the next couple of nights because his niece is marrying the cat, Moshe Adler's Einikel. So he's going for the chasna. So he decided he's going to tell me a good story to say over. So he told me this beautiful. It's not a beautiful story. It's a devastating story. A woman of Balas Tshuva came over to Rab Shach crying. I slept around on my house. I slept around on what should I do? So Rab Shach says, if you go tell him he can't believe you, he's not going to believe you. But I know I'm being marshal because I know I'm a Saita. What should I do? So Rab Shach said, I think what you need to do is you need to run away. She's a Saita. She was Mizana on her husband. What? She's when I say a Saita, I mean she's also to her husband. She has the status of a Saita, and she's a Surah Labal the boy, right? So she's a Surah Labal the boy. What should I do? I'm being marshal. So Rab Shach said, I think what you should do is you should run away. You should run away, disappear, because he's not allowed to believe you, and they won't allow the marriage to break up. But how could you, for the rest of your life, be marshal someone in living with a woman who's technically also to? But Rab Shach said, go ask Rabbi Yasher. Rabbi Yasher says, I don't believe you. You're not that one. The Mishnah says, perish. Goodbye. Go back to your husband. No, nothing to talk about. So Rab Shach clapped al chet and did tshuva every year. He said, because I sent her to Rabbi Yasher. That's the story. So Daniel Finkel told me that he was like scratching his head, like, what's going on over here? So he asked him Shlomo. So Shlomo said, if the psak halacha is that she's not Nemon, so the psak halacha is that she's mother. But it's still very hard. Like, how was it that she was allowed to live with him? Like, how you doing? So Daniel Finkel told me that he asked Rav David Pam in the Koil, and without skipping a beat, Rav David Pam told him about a Tosfos writ at the end of the Durham that I looked up. That's not there, by the way. Otherwise, I would have brought it with me. So I don't know exactly where it is. I'll have to find it. But I guess it's at the end of the Durham, because the end of the Durham talks about these types of things. But he says, in such a case, it's afkinu rabbanon lekedushin. In a case where a woman says she was mazana, but she doesn't have the amonis, how is it that she's continued to live with him? And we pass on that halachically, even though technically she might know she's also, it's because in such a case, it's afkinu rabbanon lekedushin. We say her original kedushin was bottle, and therefore, when she was mazana, she was not a neshish.
How does she live with her husband now?
That I don't know. Maybe they have to renew their vows. But that's a fascinating eye-opener of a story. Started with Rab Shach, and it ended with Rab Pam. Gewaltig. Sagt mal weiter. How do I know this halacha again that Eirach was them? Titania. Okay, we got to go fast now. Maisa b'Yana HaMelech. Yana HaMelech was the grandchildren of the Chashmonoim, so he was technically a kohen unless something went wrong along the way. He went to a city that was in the Midbar. He captured. This is towards the end of the second base of Mikdash. He captured 60 cities. In other words, they were triumphant. When they started in the second base of Mikdash, they came with their heads hanging because they were let in by the Persian Malchus. They had no money, they had no power. They didn't come in with glory. But over time, they had glory. He conquered 60 cities. Look at how far we came. He told him, our grandparents were poor and desolate. So what did they eat? They ate a little bit of herring. They ate meluchim. Meluchim is salted vegetable to preserve them. They couldn't even have fresh vegetables. They ate salty stuff. They were eating herring with a little kichel. Af anu, therefore, even though now we can have caviar and we can have the fanciest food, we have to remember how things were when we reached over here. Af anu noichal meluchim zeichel avosenu. And that's why nowadays, every kiddush, what do we eat? Herring. Why? Because even though Baruch Hashem, we have a good life, but herring, we always have to remember that things weren't always so good. Now, to make up for the fact that we're acting it's eating malukim, they jacked up the price of herring. So now you have to be rich to eat herring as well. So Baruch Hashem, it evens out. So therefore, imagine they're eating herring on golden tables. What a clash. They ate that. There was a troublemaker there. Ish letz levra. He was a letz and a levra. I hope letz and levra are not synonymous. He happened to be a letz, means he was a good guy, but besides being a letz, he was also a levra. I don't think that's on the gore. I think letz is also derogatory. Letz ubilial. Letz levra ubilial. Okay, so he's trying to machavek. Right?
Let's doesn't mean
Elazar ben Pu'ira Shemoi. He was Elazar ben Pu'ira. Yomer Elazar ben Pu'ira Yana HaMelech. Yana HaMelech. You're sitting here surrounded by the tzaddikim and the chassidim. You think they love you? They're stabbing you in the back. Libim shal perushim alecha. They hate you. They have no respect for you. Uma etza. So Yana HaMelech. I don't know. Everyone's sitting here and they're being very diplomatic. They seem to be my chassidim. They're cheering me on. How could I reveal or expose their lack of loyalty? So he says, you know what you should do? Put the tits on. Put the tits on. Watch them. They won't be able to tolerate it, and they'll protest that you must take off the tits. Hakim lahem betzitz shebeineinech. So hakim lahem betzitz shebeineinov, and at that point it was too much for the chachamim to tolerate. Ha yisham zakei nechad b'Yehuda ben Gedidya shemoi b'yomer Yehuda ben Gedidya Yana HaMelech. Yana HaMelech. Rav lach keser malchus. Be happy that we're letting you be the king, and we've given you keser malchus. Hanach keser kahuna l'zar shalar. You know what? Leave kahuna to zar shalar. He was zar shalar, so that's hardly insulting. You're accusing me that I'm a cholol. Hanach keser kahuna l'zar shalar. Shahayu ayrim, because the rumor had it that imay nishbis b'maydim, his mother, was captured by goyim, and therefore she becomes a zayna. And even though she married, his father was a kohen, it produced a cholol because he was, like they call, a ben zonah. He was a ben zonah, right? And lekohen. So when that came up, we can imagine what a tumult that made. So they had to do an investigation. Is this true? Is this true? The Yavuka Shadover, they looked around to try to find out if there's any verification of it. V'loy nimtza. They couldn't verify that this happened. Ooh, now this is a diplomatic nightmare. Because Yehuda ben Gedidya just falsely accused the king of being a ben zonah. So what happened was the Yivdalu, Vibadlu Chachmei Yisrael Bezam. They were now murufak. They were alienated because of the anger here and the rift that was now created between the Chachmei Yisrael and Yana HaMelech. And now this Knacker lowlife SOB said, Yana HaMelech. Hedid should be Yisrael kachudina. If a Hedid should be Yisrael is insulted, so they don't talk to each other. They give each other the cold shoulder. But you're not just a regular guy. Vata melech v'chayin gadol. You're just going to be cold to them. That's how you're going to punish them. They need to be annihilated. What should I do? So Zokt Elizabeth Pereira. Well, now that you ask, if you want to hear what I have to say, rhyme some, correct him. So who's going to learn the Torah if I crush the Chachamim? So he says, you need them for the Torah? You have to learn the Torah. You have to learn the scroll. Was brauchst du um the Chachamim? You have to learn the scroll. Had a krieche in Unechet, bekern Zobes. Anybody can go. The Torah liegt auf dem Schrank. Nemarosa gemoeren. Jeder kann lernen. Wat die meint nur, zij kunnen lernen. Jeder kann lernen. Kann right to learn more. You have to So Amar Amnachem by Yitzchak. The Yad Nizra Kaboy Apikursus. Right there and then, there was Apikursus in Yana Hamelach. The Havalola Meimar, he should have said, with Yana, he should have responded to this lowlife guy, Alozar. He should have said, Tenich Torah Shabbat. Yes, Torah Shabbat, anybody can take it out and read it. But Torah Shabbat Peh, what's going to be with Torah Shabbat Peh, where Avad you need Messiah, you need Rabbeah. Miyad, Vatutzot Hara, Ben Pa'ira. And what does Vatutzot mean? Right, Rashi Yosy sits, it blossomed and it grew. That's one shot. Lushnacher Ba'ara, like a fire. Like it says, like a spark that lights up a coal. So this led to terrible bad. The world was quiet and knocked out. So, how did Shimon ben Shedach survive? Because he happened to have been a brother-in-law of Yana HaMelech. So Yana HaMelech didn't kill his own brother. But the Gemara wants to know, what was this investigation? They investigated, they couldn't verify that Yanai was a Ben-Zonah. Hey Chidami, Ilema Devei Trey, Amri Ishtavoy. If there are two Edom that come along and say that she was captured, which means she is a Zonah, Uvei Trey Amri Lo Ishtavoy, and there's two Edom that contradict her, so there's nothing here at all. I'm sorry, now there is a problem, because my chaz is the Samchas Ahani, who said you should be Saimach on the Edom who said that she wasn't a Shavui, Samay Chahani. And why would you say, why don't you go by her Cheskes Kashris? So Rashi asks, the Amrit Uki Trail about the Trey, Vuki Itza Cheskasa. Why would you assume if there's steer the Edom that you follow the Edom who say that she's a Shavui? Zok Rashi, if she was here and we were making a judgment call on her herself, then she has a Cheskes Kashris. In fact, we would follow her chazakah. But she didn't come to Bezin. He came to Bezin. He doesn't have a cheskes kashus because his origins are unknown. So Zok Rashi, if there are two Edom that contradict each other, if that was the fact that they couldn't verify, well, that should have been enough to disqualify. Ella, it must be Be'er Echad. There's only an Echad. The time of the Kamak Shilei Beitrei, it was only one aid who said that he's kosher, and I'm sorry, one aid that said he's possible, and two aidim said he's kosher. And since two aidim said he's kosher, you believe the two aidim connected to one aid. Halavachi, if it was only one aid and there was no one contradicting him, mehema. So you have a raya from here that if an aid echad says something about a rayis, such as this woman who's a Zaina, the aid echad is believed.
Why is she a Zaina? Isn't she a Nusa? She was raped. I mean,
but that's called a Zaina lagabe a kohen, and she wouldn't be allowed to marry.
lagabe a kohen.
Because the question here was he wasn't a mamzer. The question is if he's a kohen. Right? He wanted to wear the tzitz. But Rava trey. Now Rava says there are two sets of edim. You're going to ask me if there's two sets of edim, so we should believe the set that says he's so no. The second set of Edom didn't say that she's kosher. The second set of Edom were mazim the first set of Edom. So they completely undid the first set of Edom. Two Edom came and said, we see Edus that this woman was captured by Hamas. She was taken in. And the other two Edom says, you're right, she was. But you left after she was taken in. We were standing there watching, and somebody immediately snuck in, pulled out this woman before Hamas could do anything to her, and put in a shifcha. So yes, someone was violated, but unbeknownst to you, after you left, she was rescued, and it was another woman who was violated. So in fact, they undid the testimony that the Edom who passled Yanei Melech said. Okay, Amar Rava, we're fighting back and forth. Is an Eirechad Neman to passel a woman to her husband? Mina minla that an Eirechad is not Neman. The Tanan we learned. Amar Shimon, Maise be Megura shel Desakim. There was like a mikveh. It was a pond of water in the city of Desakim biyavne. So Desakim is either a neighborhood or it belonged to a person. We assumed it had 40 saw. It was once measured and it was determined that it was a kosher mikveh. And one day they measured it and saw it was no longer 40 saw. Now the question is, all of the things that were toibled in it, since it was measured last, what status do they have? So the halach is kol tayr shenaso agava Reb Tarfon mitaher. Reb Tarfon said it's tahar because we will say that after the last person or last item was toibled in it, only then did it lose the water and lose its status of a mikveh. Rebbe Kiva Matama. Rebbe Kiva says, no, we have to be choshid that the moment you checked it, before anybody else came, it was chaser at that point. Reb Tarfon made an argument to say that it's good. Mikveh zeh b'cheska shalom hu aymin. It is b'cheska shalom. Misavek atabol chasroi. You want to say misafek that it's missing from the 40 saw. Until you could be sure that it's missing water, which is when you checked it the second time, assume the rest of the time it was becheskes kashrus, it was a kasher mikveh. Amar Rebbe Kiva, why are you looking at the mikveh? I don't care about the mikveh, I care about the person. Adam zeh becheskes tamei hu omi. Before he toiveled, we know for sure he was tamei. Misavik at the bolatayre. You want to be mitayre misavik because maybe he was in a kasher mikveh. Al taharenu misavik. Don't change his cheskes tamei because of a suffix. Reb Tarfon came back with an argument. Imagine a kohen is in the middle of doing avodah on the mizbeach. In the middle of his avodah, it became known to him that he was a ben gerusha or ben chalutza. So of course he has to stop working mikanu la'abah because the pasuk says v'lo yichalel. But all the avodah they did up on this point, the Gemara is going to bring psukim later to show she'avodah like shever. So you see that you only pass moving forward, not retroactive. Amar Rebbe Kiva, why would you compare it to a ben gerusha or ben chalutza? He found that he was a balmum. There, psula. There we know even the avodah that he did before he knew that he had a mum will also be possible. Amar Reb Tarfon told Rebbe Kiva, you're comparing this case to a balmum, this mikveh case to a balmum. Let's see who's right. What is this case of mikveh more comparable to? But then I'll concede. So his Rabbi Kiva doesn't. So Rabbi Kiva says, okay, I'm going to show you why it's more logical to compare this mikveh to a balmum than it is to compare it to the ben grusha ben chalutza. Mikveh psuloi b'yachid. A mikveh is pasul b'yachid, which means Rashi says bo echad b'amar b'omer ani medadativ. If one person comes along and says, I measured it and it doesn't have 40 saw, erechad nemen b'yisurin, the mikveh is going to be pasul. Uvalmum psuloi b'yachid, and the balmum is also pasul b'yachid, as the Gemara is going to show later. If one aid comes along and says you're balmum, you're balmum. The al yochiach ben gerusha ben chalutza. Don't bring a rye from ben gerusha ben chalutza. She psuloi b'shnayim. The psul of a ben gerusha ben chalutza, you need two edim to say that it's possible. That's one argument Rabbi Kiva made to say that mikvah is more doimit to balmum. But davar acher, there's another argument, and in the Maskana of the Gemara, we're going to see that davar acher is not a second argument; it's just backing up the first argument. But for now, let's take it at its face value. Davar acher mikvah psuloi begufay, balmum psuloi begufay. The mikvah, there's a psul in the actual mikvah. A balmum, there's a psul in the actual person. There's nothing wrong with him. It's because two people did something wrong that's not in him. Amalei of Tarfon, Akiva, you know something? You are overwhelmingly right. Anyone who separates himself from you, Rabbi Kiva, keparish min achai. And that was the end of the conversation. So now let's go back, Rava. Let's go back and analyze this conversation. Hi Balmum shepsula b'yochid. Rabbi Kiva mentioned, and Rabbi Tarfon agreed to him at the end, that Balmum is psula b'yochid. What do you mean it's psula b'yochid with a single aid? Hechadami. If the person is saying, I'm not a Balmum, what are you talking about? Me mehemet, are you going to believe in the aid to say that I'm a Balmum if I say I'm not a Balmum? El Shosik. Obviously, I'm not saying anything. Now, if that's how you're going to understand the case of Balmum, you have to understand the case of Ben Gerusha Ben Chalutza in a parallel fashion. Udekavasoi gabe Ben Gerusha Ben Chalutza, the Shosik. Vikatani mikva psula b'yochid, uvalmum psula b'yochid, va'ayuchich Ben Gerusha Ben Chalutza shepsula b'shnayim. So you see that even if it's Shosik by Ben Gerusha Ben Chalutza, the aid would not be believed unless there's two aidim. So you have a raya to meet Zokrava from this conversation between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Tarfon. Vabai amid of a raya. Loim de kamakish. No, it's speaking where he's being makish. Where he's being makish, eidachar is not neman. You're going to ask me if he's being makish. Why is he neman by the mum? Uduk amrit amai mehema. The amr lei shliach shlach akti. The aid can say, don't deny that you're a balmum. Pull your pants down, and we'll prove it to you right here in front of everybody that you're a balmum. And that's what Tosfos was referring to when we learned earlier that if an Eirechad, if it's something that's provable, there you'll even believe in Eirechad. And it's from this Gemara, because Abaye says over here, you know why the Eirechad is believed over here? Because he can prove it. Behind you, the Katani, and that shot, mikvah psulai begufoi, v'amum psulai begufoi. It's not a second svara to Davar Achar. The reason why the Eirechad is believed, even though the Kohen is denying that he has a mum, because it's psulai begufoi. Pull your pants down, and we'll be able to see the moon. The psul is not evident in him. There's nothing you can expect his body and see if he's a Ben Gerusha Ben Chalutza. The psul emanates from something that he had no control over. Ben Gerusha Ben Chalutza. We did say that a Ben Gerusha Ben Chalutza, if they do a voida before they found out, how do you know they're kosher? It says the Kohen and his children they can do a voida. What is a Lazari Achra come to be? Marba, Ben Zera Kosher, Ben Zera Apostle, as long as someone doesn't know he's a Ben Gerusha Ben Chalutza, even if he's possible, we can do that. Avoida, Abu de Shmuel Amar Mehelcha, it says Baruch Hashem Cheloi, Hashem will bench his army, Upal Yod of Tirza. This is one of the brachos by Levi, but we learn Afilu Chulun Shabai. Baruch Hashem Cheloi means Baruch Hashem Chulun, even if he has a child who's a Chalal, Tirza, again, that's only before he finds out about it. And beyond him, Ubansa La Koina Shia Bayom Mahim. Because you have to come to the Kohen in those days. It's a Kohen where you're going to go to a Kohen who doesn't exist in your time. Elo zekosher v'nischalo. We learn from there that if he's kosher v'nischalo, his avodah is still good. Balmum davodah psulim noam. How do we know balmum? Even if he didn't know about it, how do we know that his avodah is possible? That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Pinchas. He's having my brisi shalom. Keshu Shalom. There's a bris kahuna when he's complete. Below Keshu Chaser, a balmum is considered Chaser. But it doesn't say. Shalom. It says Shalom. But Shalom siv. And Rav Nachman vav the Shalom kitiyahu. The vav in the word Shalom is written like a yud. It's a chopped off vav to tell you that it means Shalom to teach us that a balmum, even if he didn't know about it, is avoided is possible. Okay, this was a heavy duty blood. The Mishmaka blood.
Wat er gezegd, ik ben verkeerd, wel zo ook gehaakt is het. Dat is